union membership, so supply and demand of union jobs, and the two bargaining models, the monopoly union model and the efficient contract model. So monopoly union model assumes that the union monopolizes the supply of labor so they can determine the price, which is wage, and management decide form, the employer decides the employment size. So, and then efficient contract model assumes that there is no such division of decisions between labor, union, and the management. What they do, what the model thinks is that they actually bargain over the both wages and employment. Okay? And then the result must be that Pareto efficient. Okay? And then this Pareto efficient outcome is different from the monopoly union model outcome. And then there are some interesting things about it. For example, feather bedding practice, right? So we finished up to that point, and before we move on to the next topic, we will just do a couple of textbook problems so that you can try to get the try to apply the knowledge to this problem. So in the problem 10-1, if you go to the textbook page 458, there is a problem 10-1. Suppose the firm's labor demand curve is given by this. So labor demand curve is given by and then union's utility function is given by and then if we assume the monopoly union model, let's say the bargaining is done as the monopoly union model assumes, then what would be the outcome of this bargaining? What would be the employment? What would be the wage? Right? So how do you do it? Okay, what is the essential conclusion of the monopoly union model, which is if we draw labor demand curve, right, then monopoly union model says that the outcome should be something like this, right? So this is a labor demand curve, and this is union's indifference curve, okay? Then this would be the union's wage, and this would be the employment level of the union members, okay? Then how do you solve this problem? One thing that we can see here is that the slope of the labor demand curve must be equal to the slope of the indifference curve, right? And the slope of the labor demand curve is what? In this equation, what is the slope of labor demand curve? 0.01. That is the slope. Minus 0.01. Okay. Then what is the slope of labor indifference curve? So slope of indifference curve must be what? Marginal utility of something over marginal utility of something. What is it? Slope of indifference curve must be what? Marginal utility of E or W. Must be E. Okay? In the numerator, it's always marginal utility of something on the horizontal axis. So marginal utility of E and marginal utility of wage. Okay? So that's how you get the slope of indifference curve. It should be marginal utility of something on the horizontal axis divided by marginal utility of something on the vertical axis. Okay. What is the marginal utility of E? Should be WH. What is the marginal utility of W? E. Okay. So W over E must be equal to what? 0.01. Okay. So WU should be 0.01 EU. Okay. And then you put this, and it should be on the labor demand curve, so not on the slope the same. This W and E must satisfy this condition as well. So if we combine this equation with this equation, okay, so this means 0.01 EU equals, for example, 20 minus 0.01 EU. So it means EU must be 1,000. Okay? So EU is 1,000, so WU must be $10. Okay? So if we know that how the monopoly union model works, and then if we know the labor demand curve and the union's utility function, then we can calculate actually what would union members get and how many union members would be employed. So $10 and 1,000 members. Okay. And 10-2, basically the same question, but there is a slight difference. In 10-2, the only thing that differs from 10-1 is the utility function is W minus W star times E. So W minus W star is the comparative wage. Okay. So in that case, you can do this basically the same calculation. One thing that what is interesting about 10-1 and 10-2 is the form of the indifference curve, form of the utility function. In the first case, so for example, this one, U equals W times E. So what is W times E? This is how much in total union members get, right? So each union member gets W dollars times how many? E members. So this is the total wage bill. So this is a union wage bill. You can say that this is a total wage bill for union members, okay? So in this first case, what the union tries to do is to maximize the total wage bill. Okay? So they want to maximize how much in total their members get. Okay? So that would be one possible utility function for union members. What they try to do is that they try to maximize how much they can get in total. Okay? In the second case, the second utility function is so in this case, what matters is not the total wage bill. What matters is wage differential from comparative wage times E, right? So what they try to get is maximizing total, you can say total wage premium or total wage differential. Okay? So what they care about is how much in total we get better wage compared to non-union members. Okay? So there are these type of indifferent utility functions are like possible candidates for utility function. Okay? So that is 10-1 and 10-2. Okay? Try 10-8 as well. 10-8 is actually a very simple question about elasticity. Okay, now let's move on to the next topic, strikes. So what are the strikes? I mean, strikes is a way of is an activity of union that often happens after their bargaining with management breaks down, right? In some cases those bargaining breaks down, and in some cases the union goes on to strike, basically refusing to work. Okay? So that's the activity that union does, trying to hurt, in a way, the management so that they, can persuade the management to give what union wants. Okay. So that's the next topic of our study of unions. Okay. Now let's look at simple statistics about strikes in Korea. This shows the work days lost due to strikes and lockouts per 1,000 workers. So this basically shows that how strong was strike activity in Korea. And then what it shows here is that in early 1990s, strikes were very common, okay, compared to nowadays. So in 1991, about 300 work days lost per 1,000 workers due to strike. Okay. But as you can see, that strikes has decreased a lot. Actually, strikes activity now it's very stable and low. Okay, so strikes do not happen often nowadays. Okay. But it does often sometimes. And then what does strikes try to do is they try to increase the wage rate of their union members. Okay? And then this one shows that what is the usual outcome or average outcome of wage bargaining between union and management. Okay? What does it show is that the uppermost line shows the Korean Federation of Korean Trade Unions. Okay? Their wage increase demand, average wage increase demand. So it's around 8 to 9%, 8 to 10%, between 8 to 10% every year. Okay? So 2006, they demanded 9.6, like 2011, 9.4, and 2014, like a 8.1% increase. So that's what they want. Okay? Usually 8 to 10%, around 8 to 10%. Okay, and then this the bottom one, the bottom curve shows the Korean Employers Federation. Okay. What is this? That's I forgot the Korean name. Okay. Anyway, so this is a federation of employers. Okay. And this one is around between 2 to 3%. Okay, 2 to 3%, 2 to 4%, 3.5 once, but not much. 2.3 last year. Okay, so as you can see that there is a big gap, like a 2%, 8%, right? And what is the actual outcome? Actual outcome is always around 5%, 4 to 5%. Okay, so 4.8, 4.9, 4.8, like a 3.5, 4.1. So what does it show? What it shows here is basically that, this outcome is pretty much in the middle of what is demanded and what is, counter-offered. Okay, and it doesn't change much, every year, like a 4 to 5%. Okay. The numbers are a bit different, but it's not big difference. Okay. So what it means is it seems like that, every year we can pretty much guess what would be the actual outcome. Okay. And regardless of what they say, we can guess pretty much, it should be around 5% at the end. Okay. The union says like 9%, 8%, and they say about 2%. Okay. But, it's basically, it's like in the middle. Okay. So it's like, the outcome, it seems to be, can be easily predicted. Okay. So that gives us into this question, this paradox, Higgs paradox. What is the Higgs paradox? Okay, you think about it. Think of the union and firms negotiation, bargaining over how much share they should get from firms' rents. Okay, so firm has excessive profit. Okay? So what they bargain over is how to divide this excess profit or rent between the union and the management. Okay, union and the firm. So this is a zero-sum game. Okay, so one person gets more, the other person loses more. Okay. So obviously one extreme is firm gets everything. Let's say it's $100 or 100%, or it doesn't matter, $100. And the other extreme is the union gets everything, like 100%. Okay, $100. Okay, and then initially, as the previous diagram shows, the union generally demands very high, okay, share of the rent. Let's say in this case, 75%, $75. One union wants and gives $25 to the management, to the firm. And the firm, the previous diagram shows that they generally try to give a lot less to the unions, $25, and they want to keep $75 to themselves. Okay? So if they knew that they had $100 to bargain over, okay, and then, $75 and $25 and $75, $25. Okay, so they bargain over that. And as you can see that at the end, usually what they do is that they basically settle in the middle. Okay, so it's likely that they're gonna be like 50-50. Okay. Okay, so if they knew that this is gonna be the final outcome, okay, it seems that all this bargaining is just a waste of time, right? Why just don't they say, okay, 50-50, okay, that's it. Okay, they just meet and then 50-50 and they shake hands and then go to have a drink together or whatever. Okay. But it seems like that not only it's wasteful, but also that more strange is that strikes happen. If strikes happen, what happens is that they will lose the excess profit, right? Because if strike happens, they cannot do business during the strike because workers do not work, obviously. So that will incur loss, okay, to the firm's profit. So what happens is actually it is possible that their whole share, whole pie just shrinks. Okay? So in this case, let's say it shrinks by 20, so $80. Okay? So if they decide at the end 50-50, so now what they get is not only not $50 and $50, but they get $40 and $40. So what it means? It means that strikes can actually shrink what they get at the end. Okay? So why do strikes happen? That's the question. For example, right? It seems to be pretty wasteful activity. If they knew that they're going to be on the 50% and 50% from the beginning, they should just, decide on 50-50 and then they just move on. But they just bargain and then sometimes they go on a strike and then actually what they get is actually less than what they could get without any strike activity. Strike happens not only by union's action, but also by the employer's action, right? So, for example, like a union threatens going to strike. They do not just go on a strike, without telling anyone. Actually, usually they tell the management, okay, saying that we will go on a strike 3 days from now if this thing does not go well, something like that. So they knew that when the strike would happen, and they knew that under what conditions strikes would happen. But union threatens it, and then employer says, okay, go ahead. Okay, that's how the strikes happens, right? So it's not just the union's activity, union's action, but also the management behavior, okay, makes the strikes possible. So why do they just do that? Well, why the union threatens going on a strike, and then why the employer just say, okay, no, okay, we know it's gonna be 50-50, okay, whatever, let's not do it, okay, we will let's finish this without any strike, but it's not gonna happen. It doesn't happen always. It happens many times that way, but not always. So that is called the Hicks paradox. So Hicks is a famous economist, old economist. So he basically, points out that strike activity seems to be counterintuitive, okay, because they are destroying, they are shrinking the pie, themselves, okay. Okay, then why do strikes happen? Okay, the standard argument is the information asymmetry. Why? The thing is that if they knew that in the beginning, both parties know that there are $100 to split, okay, then if they want to get 50-50, okay, they can try $50 and $50. But let's assume that union firm knows that they have $100, okay, but union doesn't know that the firm has $100. Okay, they are not sure how much, how large is the pie. Okay, so they don't know the size of the pie. Okay. So if union says, okay, let's split 50-50, then it is possible that firm said, oh, we have only $60. So you can get $30. Okay, the rest for us. So that means like they will get actually 70. Okay? But union doesn't know whether they have $30. Okay? Or it is quite possible that firm tells the truth. Okay, we have only $100. But union doesn't know whether it's right information or wrong information. But what the union knows is that the management have clear incentive to lie, right? Okay, if they lie about, okay, we have only $50, then union gets 25, and the management gets the rest. Obviously, that the union knows that firm has a reason to underreport, okay, their profit or their expected profit. So the union has, we can say, that incomplete information on the firm's financial condition. And then the management has an incentive to lie to the union about the firm's financial condition. Okay. So what happens? The union believing that the management is not telling the truth, they will demand high wage increase. Okay? So if they tell you that we have $100, but union basically says that, okay, these guys must have $120. So we demand, let's say, $70 or $80. They can afford it. Okay? But they don't know, so they will negotiate, and then if the negotiation breaks down, the union goes on a strike. Okay? The firm has an incentive to let the union to go on a strike. Okay? What kind of incentive it talks about? Okay, so the thing is this. If the firm gives in right away, okay, the union demands high wage, okay, and then the firm says, okay, then the firm has to pay high wages to their union members, okay, and then what they know is that as the as the strikes go on, the strikes is actually quite a painful thing to the union members. First thing, okay, they cannot get paid. Okay, so there is no payment for union members during the strike. Okay, and they have to do all those things like a strike activity. Okay, which can be quite stressful. Okay? They just don't sit. They do not sit around at home and then watch TV, right? They do all those kind of activities you have seen on TV, right? It's not fun to participate in all those activities. Okay, and obviously it's quite stressful to not only to themselves, to their family members. Also, there is lots of pressure from, let's say, the community to end the strike, right? Because the community will suffer, right? Because their business, let's say, think of a large firm which is not opening, then other businesses in the community also will suffer, and all those kind of pressure, economic and social and psychological pressure, will be on the union members. So what generally happens is that as the strike goes on, union members will actually lower their demand. Okay, so the firm knows that as the strikes go on, the union members will lower their demand. So what the firm tries to do, then firm chooses the optimal strike duration. It is possible this optimal strike duration is 0. Okay, let's say if the union members' demand was not that very high in the first place, then it is possible that the firm just gives in. Okay, but more often than not, okay, they just let the strikes to go on and then wait until the right moment to end the strike. Okay, so there is a trade-off. So trade-off is if the firm gives in too quickly, it has to pay high wages. So if they want to avoid paying high wages, they can wait. But if they wait too long, then the firm has to take substantial loss from lost business. Okay, so they have to balance them out. Right. So that is the model of this optimal duration of a strike. Okay, so let's think of this way. First thing is that this is the union resistance curve. What is the union resistance curve? Okay, this horizontal axis is the duration of strike. Okay. So duration of strike is that how long the strikes go on, and then the vertical axis dollars, and then this is the union resistance curve. Basically, what it means is that the union's demand. Okay, how resistant the union to the management. So at first, you can say that what it shows is the union demands $0 for the wage increase. Okay, and then as time go on, they will lower the demand. Okay, and the minimum wage demand they would make is W min. Okay, so it could be like a 10%. Okay, it could be like a 2%. So at first they demand 10%, but as time goes on, they will lower the demand. If it goes on very long time, then the union will probably demand $2% only, or 1%, whatever the minimum is. Okay, and then this blue one is the firm's isoprofit curve. Okay. So what it shows is that as wage increases, okay, firm's profit will be smaller. As the duration increases, firm's profit will be smaller. Okay, so this firm's isoprofit curve is negatively sloped. Okay, as the duration of strike increases, to be on the same profit, they should lower the wage. Okay. And as you can see, pi A and pi B, which one has the bigger profit? Pi A, pi B, which one has bigger profit? Pi B has the bigger profit. So what it shows here is that if the management gives in to the union's demand as soon as the union goes on a strike, so that means that they're going to take $0 as the union demands, and they give $0, then their profit going to be pi a. But that's not optimum. Okay? The optimum thing to do is actually they wait until they reach the point P. Okay? And then they will pay WT dollars, and then the duration of strike going to be T periods. Okay? So what it shows here is that duration of strike, it is determined, okay, by the firm's decision to maximize its profit. Questions? So what it shows here is that, the duration of strike will depend on, for example, how the union resistance curve look like, how the isoprofit curve looks like. So in more detail, when the strike gonna get longer, one thing, initial demand were high. Okay, that means that union resistance curve is on the higher side. Okay? So if the union resistance curve that starts from W0, let's say starts at much higher place, then as you can see that the duration of strike gonna get longer. Okay? So something like but if it was longer, the demand were higher, then optimal duration gonna something like this. Okay? So obviously the union demands higher wage increase, then it takes longer time to end the strike. Second, the union had enough strike fund. So what the strike fund is? Okay, strike fund is in peace times, union, when they collect the union due, okay, they basically save some of the money, okay, into the strike fund. So this strike fund is used to pay for the members on a strike, okay, the part of their wage. So this is gonna be the money they will use, during the strike for their livelihood. Okay. If you actually read a newspaper article about strike activity, there is generally a mention about how they, how they get the money from the strike fund during the strike. Okay? So sometimes if the union is big, then the union itself has its own strike fund. But quite often, if the union is small, then there is a federation of unions, the bigger unions, they have their own strike fund, and they subsidize these union members going on a strike. So actually you can read it in newspapers. It's not much of money, okay, in generally. It's not that big money, but, it is important. So if the union has enough strike fund, obviously it means that they can go on a longer strike. Okay? If they have very little strike fund, then there's the pressure, the economic pressure for the union members will be greater. So the union resistance curve, something like much more steeper. Okay? If it's much more steeper, so since they do not have money, then obviously the optimal duration will be shorter. Okay? Because they will lower the demand much more quickly. And the same thing basically. The union had alternative source of income during strike. So not only from strike fund, sometimes the union actually members to work part-time during strike. Okay? So they have to make up for the loss of earnings. Okay? So if it is possible, then the union can have longer strikes. Okay, at the firm side, not only the union side, firm side, if the firm had a low profit, okay, that means they are not making much money, okay, then giving high wage increase to their union members would be quite difficult. Okay? So they wait until the union lowers the demand. Okay? So loss of profit will be smaller since they have low profit in the beginning. And the firm has faced an elastic demand curve. Okay? So this will basically affect how the isoprofit curve is shaped. Okay? So if the firm had faced an elastic demand curve, which means that if they give high wages to the union members, okay, it will affect the price of their product. Okay? And then if the demand is elastic, then they will have trouble in selling their goods. Okay? And the firm had high inventory. So they have lots of inventory. Okay? They have lots of things to sell without making new things. Obviously, the firm can take longer strike, or the firm were able to find replacement workers. Okay? So everything basically makes the strike longer. Okay. So the thing is that in general, you can say that during the recession, firm can take longer strike. Okay? If it's in the recession, the firm has low profit. The firm has high inventory, right? Because they cannot sell well. Okay? And since lots of workers are available during recessions, okay, they can find replacement workers. Or the union has difficulty in finding alternative job, okay, during the strikes. So during recessions, okay, during recessions, firm, okay, have an incentive to make strike to go on for longer period of time. Okay, during booms, the strike's gonna be generally shorter. Why? Because the firm have high profit, they are selling well, so they have to make new things, right, quite quickly. Okay, so all those things. Okay. Questions? Okay, nowadays strikes do not happen that much, so. Oh, 10-7 about the strikes, so try. Okay, now let's move on to the last topic of union effects, okay, which is, it looks not only about the union per se, it tries to look at what is the effects of union on the whole economy. Okay? One thing, quite important, actually quite the topic that people have been most interested in about union is the union wage effects. Okay, what we mean by union wage effects. Okay, now we have to define two terms. First, let's define the individual union wage gain. Okay, what does it mean? It means basically the percentage increase of wages due to unionization. Okay, so there is a WU and WN. WN is the wage the individual would receive without unionization. Okay, so think of a company. Let's say Hyundai Automobiles. They have a union. Okay, but let's assume that they have no union. Okay, so hypothetically, think of a situation where there is no union in this company, Hyundai Automobiles. Okay, then without the unionization, the workers would get WN. Okay, with the unionization, the same worker would get WU. Okay, so we can say that this is what the actual Hyundai Automobile workers get right now with the union. Okay, so WN is the wage they would get without the union. If there was no union, they would get WN, which is actually not possible to see, right? Okay? You cannot guess how much they can actually get without union, since we know that Hyundai automobiles have union, so we don't know how much they would get without the union, which is actually unobserved. And if you think of Samsung Electronics employees have no union. So we know that how much they get, WN, right? Okay, we can say in a way. But we don't actually know that how much they would get, WU, because they have no union. We cannot actually see it. Okay? Get it? But theoretically, even if we cannot see it, theoretically we can define individual union wage gain. This is the true measure of union wage gain. Okay? So think of a company that we have no union, we are getting, let's say, $10 per hour. If we had a union, we would get $12 per hour. So that $2 increase is due to the union. Okay? That is what we gain with unionization. So we call it union wage gain. So we actually say the 20% increase gonna be our union wage gain. Okay? With the union, we can get 20% wage increase. But in most cases, as I said, in every case, we see only one of them. Okay? Okay, so the union wage gain, so there's an individual union wage gain. So we can think of this individual union for each individual. We can think of this theoretical thing called individual union wage gain. So for some person, it's going to be 20%. Some people probably 15%. For some people, it's 7%. Whatever. Okay, and then we just average them out. Then we can actually say that this is the union wage gain in the economy. So we see that every company, we calculate union wage gain, which actually we cannot actually calculate, but say that if it is possible, we can calculate for each person union wage. So we can calculate union wage gain for Samsung Electronics. If they were unionized, they would get this. Okay, and for Hyundai Automotive, if they were not unionized, they would get this. So that their union wage gain is this, and then we just average all them out, then we can get the union wage gain. Okay, you get it? So this is a theoretical concept. It's not actually observable number. It's a theoretical concept of union wage gain. Okay. And this is actually what the union brings to us. Okay? If Samsung Electronics employees ask me that what would I get if we organize a union? Okay, we should tell them that you would get this. WU minus WN divided by WN, okay, which we actually do not know exactly what W is. Okay. Now, with the union wage gain is rarely observed. As I said, we typically observe either WU or WN, okay, not both. Okay, but there is another term, another term called union wage gap. What is union wage gap? Union wage gap is the observed percentage difference. Okay, this is different. The union wage gap is just that in our economy, we average union members' wage. And then in our economy, we average non-union members' wage. We can calculate. There are two groups in our economy: union members, non-union members. We can actually get the average wage of union members. We can actually get the average wage of non-union members. That we can actually, get. And then we just use that union members' wage minus non-union members' wage divided by non-union members' wage. That is, we call union wage gap. Okay, that's what we can see. Union wage gain is that's what we cannot see. Okay, get it? Okay, so that's the difference. Okay, let me explain this way. So union wage gain is theoretical concept that is unobservable, actually, unobserved. Okay, why? Because we see only WU or WN. Union wage gap is just you can say average difference between union members and non-union members. Okay, observed number. So if, let's say, in our economy there are only two companies, Hyundai Automobiles and Samsung Electronics. Hyundai Automobiles is unionized. Samsung Electronics is not unionized. Okay, union wage gain is the question where how much the Samsung Electronics workers would get if they were unionized. Okay, and to get the union wage gain for Hyundai Automobiles, we should know that how much they would get without the union. Okay, union wage gap you can actually see. Union wage gap is just, it's easy. Average wage of Hyundai Automobiles minus average wage of Samsung Electronics, because these groups are unionized, the other group is non-unionized, divided by Samsung Electronics workers non-union, the average wage. That is union wage gap. Okay, we have to assume, in this case, when I say the union wage gap and union wage gain, we have to assume that we are assuming that the workers are basically the same except for their unionization state. Okay, we are just comparing, for example, like man to man with the same experience and same education, all those things. Okay, we have to do it. So other things are equal. Okay, other things are equal. Okay? That would be the only fair comparison. Okay, so we can get the union wage gap. Actually, we can easily calculate union wage gap if we have enough data. Okay, the question is actually what is the union wage gap and what is the union? So these two are different. So the question is how similar these two numbers. This number we cannot see. This number we can actually see. So is this number is the same as this number? That is the question. Okay. So if the Samsung Electronics employee come and ask that what would be my gain what would be our average gain if we organize a union, then you can actually give them the number, the union wage gap. Okay, because you guys are getting 5% less than, let's say, Hyundai Automobile workers, then it should be 5%, you can say. But is it the right answer? That is the question. Is it the right answer? Okay, so that brings us into this two quite interesting concept. One is called spillover effect. Okay, what is a spillover effect? Okay, let's think of two sectors. Okay, union sector and non-union sector. Okay, let's say that is. So in this sector, what happens here is that before the union, the blue is the after union. So before the union is created in this economy, everyone get $WG because they are the same workers. Okay, we assume everything else is the same. So there is no union, so everything's same. So they will get $0, both sectors. But let's say in this sector, union is organized. Okay. Since the union is organized, their wage will go up from W0 to WU1. So this sector, wage increases to union wage level. Now the union wage level is higher than W0, then what happens? The workers will lose their jobs because the demand will decrease. Okay? So demand decreased, so from E0U to E1U. Okay? Then these number of workers lose their job. one thing that's possible is that these workers will go to this non-union sector and tries to find an employment there. So what happens is that the supply curve in the non-union sector just shifts to the right. Okay? Get it? So what happens? Their wage level at the end, this non-union sector goes down to WN1. Okay? Get it? So, what does it mean? It means union wage gap, union wage gain for these workers is actually these two numbers between W1 and W0, right? Without union, they would get W0. With the union, they would get WU1. So this is a union wage gain. Okay? Then what is the union wage gap? The union wage gap is WU1 minus what? W0 or WN1? It's WN1. Okay? So we don't see W0. Okay, what we see here is that after unionization, we see WU1 and WN1. Okay? So what does it mean? It means that if this spillover, this is called spillover, right? Workers are spilled over into non-union sector. And if this spillover happens, non-union workers' wage would be lower than the pre-union wage. Okay, pre-union wage is the wage that workers would get before the union was created in anywhere. So if this economy is free from any union, that's we call it pre-union wage. Non-union wage is that union is there and you are not the union member. That's non-union wage. Okay. So in that case, union wage gap is bigger than the union wage gain. Okay? Okay? So that's the spillover effect. So if I go back to my previous example, so Samsung Electronics employee will ask me how much gain I would get. Then let's say the percentage difference between Hyundai Automobile and Samsung Electronics is 5%. If I say 5%, actually what I'm giving them is too big. They would get actually less. You know what I mean? Okay. So I say that the Hyundai Automobile workers get 5% more than Samsung Electronics workers. Then what we are saying is actually WU1 and WN1. That looks like 5%. But in reality, it's not 5%. It could be just 3%. Okay? So that's the spillover effect. So if we see this, if we think of spillover effect, then actual wage gain should be lower than the union wage gap we observe. But there is an opposite thing. What is the opposite thing? Opposite thing is this. Let's assume, now let's think of the non-union sector. So in the non-union sector, we have workers, right, trying to get a job there. Okay. If you're an employer in the non-union sector, now you have to think of the possibility that your workers would be organized. Okay. So you don't want your workers to be organized. Okay. So what you should try? What you can try is to increase your workers' wage voluntarily. Okay? So what it means is that you would pay, let's say before any union exists, you paid $0. Okay? Now the other company have a union. So and then now you're worrying about, okay, my company workers may be trying to have a union themselves. Okay? So I should try to prevent them from organizing the union. How would I do it? I mean, there could be many ways, but the most civil way of doing it is probably I have to treat them better. Okay? So by treating them better, I give them voluntarily, let's say, some wage increase and tell them that, you don't need a union. Okay? I'm giving you, the fair wage increase without all these, bothering, union thing. Okay? So if that's true, since there is a cost of organizing union incurred to the workers themselves, if they are happy with what's going on in this current company, they probably have no incentive to organize the union themselves. Okay? So that one, we call it the threat effect. So threat effect is the voluntary wage increase from W0 to Wn star given by the employers to their workers in response to the threat of unionization. Okay? So they see the unionization in other companies as a threat. Then to prevent that from actually happening, they have an incentive to give wage increase to their own workers, even without the union. So that we call it the threat effect. Now, let's think of threat effect. Okay, so threat effect basically tells us that non-union wage is actually higher than the pre-union wage. So if I go back to the previous example, okay, oh, yeah, that's 5%. But if there is a threat effect, okay, actual wage increase would be not 5%. Their gain would be probably 7%. Okay? So the Samsung Electronics company is paying their employees actually more than the market wage to prevent them from being organized. Okay? So that's another possibility. Okay? So in summary, spillover effect, what happens? Wages increase in the union sector. So unemployed workers in the union sector spill over to the non-union sector. And non-union wage drop and employment level increases. So at the end, the union wage gap, which is the observed union wage gap, overstates the union wage gain. Okay? Overstates means it's bigger than true. Threat effect, non-union employers may raise wages to prevent unionization, so the union wage gap understates the union wage gain. Okay, get it? The union wage gap is too small. It's smaller than the union wage gain. Okay? So if you have these two effects, actually depending on which effect is greater, you are not sure whether the union wage gain is bigger or smaller than the union wage gap. Okay, we talked about the wage level effect. But there are other effects of union. One is that union has actually, I think I talked about it before, union has an effect on the wage equality. Because the union wages are more equal than non-union members, so that's one thing. Because the union workers are more homogeneous group than non-union workers, then unions may stress pay equity in collective bargaining negotiations, talked about it. So another thing is that the union firms offer less training than non-union firms to workers. The reason is that since the union firms generally pay higher wages, they try to cut down the other cost. Okay? So it is possible the union firms offer less training than non-union firms to workers. But that is actually the another argument. Okay? So well, in general, the union wages are more equal than non-union wages. So as I said, if you look at the whole picture, so union can actually increase wage inequality because there is a difference between union wage and non-union wage. But also if you look at the inside the union firm, the wage distribution is more equal. So at the end, we are not sure that union actually increases wage inequality or decreases wage inequality. But most facts point to the direction that union actually decreases wage inequality in the economy. Okay, and then if we look at the non-wage effects of union, one thing is that union okay, can provide voice. This is quite important function of union, providing voice to the worker. Okay? So if you're alone, let's say you have complaint about your company, it's very difficult to say your complaint. Okay, if you're the only if you're alone, because it is possible that you may get some disadvantage because of telling your complaint to your boss. But if you are organized, okay, it is possible that you can tell this complaint to the union, and then this union as a group can file complaint to the management. Then the individuals will be safe from this possible that the penalty from the management. So that we call it like a voice. Okay, so the worker can complain, or worker can actually point out that things to change in the management, all those things. So that's what the unions do. And then that type of function, providing voice, can actually lower the quit rate. Because if you have a complaint, there is no way of correcting this problem in this company since you are alone. The only thing you can do is to quit this job and then go somewhere else, right? But if you have a union, and then you can actually correct this, let's say, then you don't have to leave. You can actually try to change while keeping your job in this company. So union members are generally less likely to quit than non-union members. Okay, that's actually observed fact. Okay, union members do not quit much compared to non-union members. So the reason could be that they have a voice. Okay. So the union can. So since the union members generally have low quit rate, or they are not laid off because they are protected by the collective bargaining. So generally, the union members have low job turnover rate. So this lower job turnover rate may lead to higher productivity. So these union members, since they stay with this company for a long, long time, they probably accumulate more specific human capital. So they become more productive as time goes on. Okay? Or they probably invest more in these firm-specific skills. So all those things can lead to higher productivity. Okay? So the union, so there is an argument that union can actually increase productivity. Okay? However, there is actually counter-argument. However, the unions generally have restrictive rules and labor disputes. So restrictive rules. So in the collective bargain, there are all sorts of agreement between union and management that can actually often limit how this company is managed. Okay, so that kind of restrictive rules. I talked about the feather bedding practice, for example. Okay, those kind of rules can actually decrease productivity and profitability. Okay. Or the labor disputes. The union members can go on a strike. Okay, they can do lots of things that can hurt that firm's business. That can also decrease productivity and profitability. So that what is the union's effects on the company or on the economy is actually a very controversial topic. Actually, if you listen to like a pro-union argument, they generally talk about this. Okay, so union can actually increase productivity because it can provide voice. They have lower turnover rate, so they are more productive. Actually, the data itself, seems to be that union workers are actually more productive. But there is a controversy about whether it is because of union or it's just that simple association. One possibility is, for example, that if this company has a union, okay, And high ability workers are generally want to work for unionized firm. Why? If everything else equal, if you work in the unionized firm and you join union, you can enjoy higher wages, okay, better working conditions, okay, more job security. So generally, the union firms attract a lot more people willing to work for this company, so they can be more selective in finding more productive workers. So one argument, so the argument is the union increases productivity. The counter argument is that union firm can actually hire more productive workers in the first place. Okay? It's not because union increased productivity. They just had productive workers from the beginning. But anyway, we don't know actually which is true. Okay? That's one thing. So there is a two argument. And also that there is counter argument that union firms do not have higher productivity. Actually, they have lower productivity. We just, their productivity may be lower than what they would be without the union. Okay. Questions? Okay. There are a few things that I didn't cover in the textbook. For example, like public sector unions, which is not applicable to Korean labor market. Okay, so we finish it here, and then next week we move on to the incentive wage and unemployment.